Hey guys, how's it going? Silly question, you can't answer me. Not the first time I've done that, by the way. But on this video, I will be talking about Umbrella Academy Season 2, Episode 3, and it is called The Swedish Job. And this is the best episode so far, I think. So, a couple of sort of meaty sort of moments, particularly I think on the Alison side of the plot. So I think I'll start with that because her and Luther basically start getting closer to like finally seeing each other. But there's some good stuff on the Alison side of the plot. So she comes across Klaus, she finds him, and she basically finds out then Klaus and her husband Ray were together in a cell, and that he introduces himself to Ray, confirms that he's like related to Alison, and she finds out basically about what's been going on with Klaus. The opening of the episode is really cool actually because it goes back to 1960 and it just shows you the backstory of how Klaus became like this great spiritual like type prophet, or how he became known as this. So he did sort of start off this sort of cult of worshippers. And it's because he was able to get it's Ben the ghost to help him like use powers. So he was able to get Ben to like lift him up without obviously people seeing and do various things. So this convinced them that he was this almighty sort of like prophet, and that's how the cult actually started. And so that's like a gag in the episode where she says, "Oh yeah, you do realise you've started a cult here," and he like gets all defensive. Well, I wouldn't call it a cult, but yeah, she's like, it's definitely a cult. So they reconnect, and the big story of this episode for Alison and probably the episode overall is then her and the rest of like the black the African American protesters are planning this big sit-in at this diner, and they're planning it for when Kennedy arrives in town to really grab headlines. And it's something Alison and Ray, her husband, have been planning for ages, but he's still in prison at this point. And there's this debate over whether they should go ahead with the sit-in if he's not around to do it. And she tries to convince the others in the group, well, Ray would want this. And there's one of them who's like very defensive and said, well, did he actually say that? You can never know that. This is his thing. And actually the woman who owns the laundrette and like letting them use the space kind of sticks up for Alison, and they all decide to have a vote, and yeah, it works out in their favour, of course. So they're set to have the sit-in regardless. And at the same time, we see Klaus and Ben working their sort of magic and actually getting Ray released, and that's quite a funny little scene because you've got like the cop on the front desk, and his sandwich, mysteriously starts like the way it's shot initially when it's just flat on the desk it's almost like it's coming to life, and so it starts floating in the air, and obviously he freaks out, but then like a message appears on the typewriter, typed out obviously, and it's like, yeah, release Ray, forget the second name actually, which is funny because it's a distinct surname, but release him or die basically. So this obviously freaks the cop out, and Ben gets released. So obviously Klaus working some magic for Allison, and Ray eventually does join in them at the sit-in, but it's at quite a late stage. But the whole sit-in scene is really well done. It's very nicely shot. It's sort of gripping and has good tension to it. And it really, yeah, I think it really sells the kind of political issue of that time very well, where they're all in the diner, and at first there's, because Allison walks in first, and there's first of all, obviously they're like, no, get out, you're not welcome, and she sits down defiantly, but then she's joined by the others, they all walk in, so obviously that's, yeah, a bigger kind of resistance, they all sit down, and that's the whole thing, and gradually like they kind of prod them, and eventually there's a reaction which then gives the police an excuse to all come in. And it's right near the end of the episode, but it's a really gripping scene. The way it just spirals out of control, I think, feels very realistic. Now, as I said, Ray does join in them, but he also on this day, I mean, first of all, he's like met Klaus, as I said, but he's also met Luther, because Luther gets Allison's address. He gets it from his boss basically, because he says, could you do this for me? Because obviously he's got connections in the town. And so that's the thing where Luther actually goes to Allison's home, and it's around the time then Ray has gotten out of jail, and Ray comes home and he sees Luther there, and Luther asks for Allison, and that's when he finds out the surname. The surname's different, so she's married. So Luther pretends to be a brother, and Ray lets him in, and they start talking, and you can see Luther really is getting very sort of emotional and uneasy, but Ray's very nice to him. But Luther says, yeah, can you just leave her a message saying I called round? So later on, when it comes to the sit-in and Ray gets there, yeah, he does mention it to Allison, and Ray's kind of on edge himself because he's freaking out over meeting these two guys who claim to be like related to Allison, and he really is suspicious. So it leads to a bit of a sort of kind of semi falling out between the two of them, and she's obviously trying to calm him down and explain. But yeah, the whole scene sort of escalates, and like Allison's kind of like provoked out of jumping out of seat because like the diner owner like pours coffee on her, and so it leads to a thing outside, and Ray starts getting like battered with a nightstick really badly. It's like repeatedly several times, and eventually Allison is able to save him. She uses her powers, and he looks up and notices this. He certainly notices then something happens. She does something to make the cop back off, basically. So she does the whole mind control thing, and that's when he backs up. And obviously Ray's suspicious of this because he sees kind of what happens, but also he doesn't believe then, yeah, a racist cop like that would back off just on something Allison said. So that sets him off again, and yeah, he kind of runs away, and so that there's a bit of tension there. And Klaus then kind of pulls Alison away and says, "No, we've got to go. We can't really stay here. Things are out of control." And I will say there's actually another one of my favourite scenes of the episode is this fake out we get with Luther when he thinks he sees Alison. So he's out running, and it's actually a very funny scene, but he's running and someone passes him who looks like Alison. And he does a double take. He looks around and he actually trips over, and it's like this. As I said, it's not Alison. It's someone who looks like her, and she's with a couple of boys. But it's sort of funny, and it also, I think, gets across that he has Alison on his mind, and she does look a fair bit like her, so you can understand it. But yeah, it's kind of, there's some good comedy actually. Luther kind of saying, "Oh, my bad," and then one of the boys calls him like a dipshit, which is pretty funny. But it is a lighter moment with Luther, because I think you're used to him being a bit more brooding, or a bit more just. He's quite a sensitive character, I think, in a way, but yeah, there's a lighter moment with him, I think. So that's kind of good stuff. And he obviously takes the news of Alison being married in a really bad way. It really affects him. So later on, near the end of the episode, at his fight, he's like overcome with emotion and basically just loses the fight and just gets battered by the other fighter, because he's so distracted by the whole Alison thing. And the other thing on that end is that number 5 goes to Vanna in this episode. He actually tracks her down and basically tells her the whole sort of plot, tells her the deal, what's going on, the end of the world stuff, because obviously with her having amnesia, she knows very little about what's happening or the past, and he lays it all out. And so then he kind of says, because she like phones the woman she's staying with just to check in and stuff, and he's kind of anxious, then we've got to go, we've got the world to save basically. So I think again in this episode we're seeing just again them slowly coming together, and what's going to lead to them meeting up. And so I think that's maybe my only complaint in general, but for this episode is just maybe it's just again it's certain, I don't know, plots and subplots just kind of plodding a little bit, just taking a little too much time, but it's still a really enjoyable episode. Anyway, Vanna and 5 go to Luther's fight at the end, and they obviously see him and what a state of mind he's in, and sees him get like pulverized by this other fighter. But so it looks like the 3 of them now are going to be kind of in a group maybe for the next episode, or potentially anyway. And the milkmen, as it looked like from the last episode, did target Vanna and went after her, tried to kill her. That's a really good scene actually, in like this sort of cotton field, them chasing after her, and at one point she's confronted by one of them, and she uses her powers out of nowhere to like control the bullets, and that's kind of how she survives. And I like that, because obviously with the amnesia, she wouldn't have known she's got these powers. So that's quite a cool way for her to find out. Then they just came out of nowhere as a reaction when she needed to survive this attack from the milkmen. One, I think, thing I have with the milkmen is it might become a bit repetitive if they're just going through most of the group and just like going after them one by one. Obviously they've already they were already after Diego, and now you've got Vanya. So it might get a little bit repetitive, especially if you know, hey, these are the main characters, so they're not really going to die, or at least not at this stage. But they're obviously pretty good villains. I think they're quite effective, but that could be one issue if that happens too many times. Speaking of such things, obviously Diego survived, as I thought he would. It obviously got, stabbed by his father in the whole altercation. He survived because his girlfriend Layla happened to be following him, which I guess is no surprise. And she's the one who saved him, brought him home and kind of stitched him up, sorry. Also, I do think Layla's growing on me, and she does have decent chemistry, the actress with Diego, the actor playing him. I think I do actually quite enjoy them, the way they feed off each other. They do have a quirky kind of chemistry, I think. But yeah, she actually reveals to him that she found her parents dead when she was 4, and I think that's meant to kind of say, well, this explains some of her anxieties and some of her mental issues. Now, of course, there's a reveal at the end of this episode which may suggest that she might have been lying about that. Or if she wasn't lying, she was at least using it to manipulate him. But they do have this funny sort of dynamic where it's kind of an emotional scene, and he's there to comfort her, and she then gives him a slap, which is quite funny, and then the next minute she's on top of him and they're having sex, which is a really funny scene because you've got the UFO guy in the other room, and he's in the other room as they're tossing clothes off, and the clothes are hitting the window, so that's a pretty funny scene. But yeah, that's a reveal at the end of the episode. Then Layla is a double agent, and she is the daughter of, I'm not quite sure the character's name, but the handler. And the handler who we saw briefly in the last episode, she's the one who was shot by Hazel, and she was demoted because she obviously failed on the case, and obviously she was off for a long time, so they basically demoted her when she returned. And she was determined to kind of find the Umbrella Academy and I guess maybe win her superiors round. So we have this scene where she goes into the pet shop, that being the handler, and we see the fish tank and the box which is opening and closing, and she makes a kid wet his pants as well, something she whispers in his ear, which is pretty funny. But so it's revealed at the end of the episode that Layla is her daughter, which is quite a cool reveal, I think. So yeah, Layla goes to the same pet shop, and she gets like a locker type key from the box in the fish tank, which kind of it's like got a number on, and then she goes home, and yeah, that's the reveal. Then she's the daughter of the handler. So we'll see what happens now with this. It's sort of interesting because I do like the dynamic with her and Diego. So it's maybe a bit of a shame then she's now going to be working against him. Although we may still get plenty of scenes with her, at least undercover with him. But we'll see. This does add fresh possibilities as well. So we'll see what happens. Um, and the other kind of thing with Klaus, which I liked, was that he goes into this hardware store, and there's this guy in there, and we know immediately it's someone he knows, but I was scratching my head on who it could be, but it's then confirmed. It's the guy he knew in the war, and he obviously had a relationship with him, and he like tragically died in the war. And this is obviously the 60s, so before the Vietnam War. So Klaus also is looking to change history, looking to alter the past, and he's going to try and talk. I think his name's Dave or something. Going to try and talk Dave out of going to war into like rolling up. And like the ghost, what was his name? Ben. Yeah, Ben's trying to talk, saying no, this is a bad idea. But yeah, this is something Klaus wants to do. So it's another example of trying to change history and another personal connection. So that's pretty solid stuff. Quite interesting. And that's the episode. I think it's definitely the best episode so far. It flowed really well. I thought there was some meaty stuff, especially with Alison. This season, I'm still not sure it's quite living up to the quality of the first season, but we'll see. I mean, it's still only 3 episodes in, and I am enjoying it enough, and it did get over like the rough kind of first episode for me. I think the 2 episodes since then I've enjoyed a lot more, and I'm generally enjoying what's happening with the characters. It's just probably the story is maybe a little bit repetitive, and I think until we get all of them together it's maybe going to be a bit frustrating, but I am enjoying it again, so that's good. So that's my thoughts on episode 3 of Umbrella Academy season 2. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. And thanks for listening. I'll be back with the review for episode 4 soon. But I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.